The story I am going to tell today is in some way linked with my personal, without presumption, story. Because the first time I heard about Tom Pryce as a Formula One driver happened in the first years of 1980s when I was very young, and some friends, just a bit older than me, told me the story of a driver unluckily dead with a tremendous, horrifying crash during the South African Grand Prix of Formula One of the year 1977. Thomas Maldwyn Pryce was born the 11th of June 1949 and unluckily died today, 5th of March, but of the year 1977. He was a British racing driver from Wales, known for winning the Brands Hatch Race of Champions, a non-championship Formula One race in 1975, and for the circumstances surrounding his death. Tom Pryce is the only Welsh driver to have won a Formula One race and is also the only Welshman to lead a Formula One World Championship Grand Prix, 2 laps of the 1975 British Grand Prix. He started his career in Formula One with the small token team, making his only start for them at the 74 Belgian Grand Prix. Shortly after winning the Formula 3 support race for the 74 Monaco Grand Prix, Pryce joined the Shadow team and scored his first points in Germany in his only 4th race. Pryce later claimed 2 podiums finishes, his first in Austria in 75 and the second in Brazil a year later. Pryce was considered by his team and most of his contemporaries as a great wet-weather driver. In his 4 seasons in the sports with the Shadow team from 74 to 77, Pryce was identified as a potential future race winner and future world champion. Although the car was often unreliable and rarely in the points, it was on occasion quick enough to grab headlines. During the practice session for the 1977 South African Grand Prix, run in wet conditions, Pryce was faster than everyone, including world champion drivers like Niki Lauda and James Hunt. During the race, he collided at high speed with the safety marshal, Frederik Jansen van Vuren, and both men were killed instantly. A memorial to Pryce was unveiled in 2009 in his hometown of Ruthin. Tom Pryce took an interest in cars while driving a baker's van at the age of 10, before informing his parents that he wanted to be a racing driver. During an interview with journalist Alan Harry in 1975, he stated that he had wanted to become a pilot of aircraft, but thought he was not intelligent enough. Like many future Formula One drivers, Tom had his childhood racing hero. In his case, it was Lotus Scottish driver Jim Clark. Pryce's mother recalled that he was very upset when Clark died at the Hockenheim ring in April '68. His father noted that he was very upset also when Jochen Rindt was killed during the Italian Grand Prix of Formula One at Monza in 1970. Tom left school at 16 years of age. His mother insisted he had to take an apprenticeship as a tractor mechanic at a technical college, so to give him something to fall back on, as she put it, if his career as a racing driver was unsuccessful. In 1975, Pryce married Fenella, more commonly known as Nella, who he met at a disco in Otford, Kent in 1973. Tom Pryce's helmet design was, in comparison to later drivers, simple and restrained. His helmet was plain white, all over until 1970. At that year's race at Castlecombe, his father asked Tom to make his helmet stand out more, so that he could easily identify him in a pack of cars. Tom added 5 black vertical lines to his helmet, placed just above his visor. From that time, the only change to his design was the addition of a Welsh flag to the side of his helmet in 1974. Tom Pryce's first steps into motor racing came at the Mallory Park circuit in Leicestershire when he was 20. Pryce was put through his paces by Trevor Taylor, an ex-Team Lotus driver and old teammate of Pryce's childhood hero, Jim Clark. From there, Pryce went on to compete in the Daily Express Crusader Championship, a series run by motor racing stables for racing school pupils using Lotus 51 Formula Ford cars. Races alternated between the Brands Hatch and Silverstone circuits. Pryce made his debut at the former. He recalled, "The races were £35 a time, but I sold my Mini and my parents offered all the help and encouragement I could wish for." Words of Tom Pryce during an interview with the journalist Alan Henry. The prize for the overall winner of the series was a Formula Ford Lola T200 worth £1,500. The series was decided at the last round, held at Silverstone, the day before the 1970 Formula One International Trophy. Pryce qualified on the third row for the race, which was held in the rain. The father, Jack Pryce, remembered that his son was rubbing his hands in delight. He always loved racing in the rain. The early part of the race was led by a driver called Chris Smith, but then heavy rain started and Pryce was able to catch up with Smith and overtake him before winning by a comfortable margin. He was given the prize, his Lola T200, by Sir Max Aitken. Pryce took his new car to Brands Hatch, where he was allowed to house it in one of the old stables at the bottom of the paddock. Pryce soon abandoned his farming career and moved to a guest house in West Kingsdown, near the Brands Hatch circuit. Pryce continued to make a name for himself during 1971, entering a new twin-seater sports car category called Formula F100, which he won with what was described by motorsports author David Tremaine as an embarrassing ease. He then moved up to Formula Super V, driving the then choice Royale RP9 for Team Ramsey Investment, and soon made his Formula 3 debut for the same manufacturer at Brands Hatch. In that race at Brands Hatch, Pryce took an unfancied Royale RP11 to first place in the Formula 3 support race for the 72 Formula 1 Race of Champions, against many established Formula 3 drivers such as Roger Williamson, Jochen Mass and James Hunt. So large was Pryce's advantage at the end of the race that many of the other teams voiced an opinion that Pryce's car had run the race underweight. It turned out that the circuit's weight bridge certificate had expired and everyone's car had been underweight. Pryce retired from the leading group in the following 2 rounds at Oulton Park and Zandvoort. And then, during practice for the support race of the 72 Monaco Grand Prix, his car came to a stop at Casino Square after a wire had come loose. He had exited his car to correct the problem when Peter Lamploff lost control of his car and struck the Royale RP11. Pryce was knocked into a shop window and broke a leg. The Welshman was back in action 2 weeks after his incident in Monaco. Pryce also ran in the Formula Super V series, winning the series by a comfortable margin. He declared later, "I won just about every race I went in for." A run with Royale's Formula Atlantic Works team was also in store for Pryce during 72. where he took pole position for the final 3 rounds of the championship and won the final round at Brands Hatch. He continued racing in Formula Atlantic in 1973, winning 3 races. Royal soon had plans to enter Formula 2, such was the Welshman's talent. The ambition to run in the Formula 2 Championship was planned to be financially fueled by a Liechtenstein driver, Manfred Schurter. These plans only resulted in one of Royal's F2 car being built before the project was scrapped and Bob King, the head of Royal, left the company. Following an invitation to test one of his cars, Pryce found himself racing in the Formula 2 series with Ron Dennis' Rondel Racing outfit. His best result for the team came at the Norris Ring, where he was leading the race until a brake failure meant he had to give up first place to teammate Tim Schenken. At the end of 1973, Pryce won the Grovewood Award for his effort during the year. Jack Pryce recalled that his son did not want to win the award, as he thought it was a jinx on a driver's career. Basically, he thought a prize received at that stage was more bad luck than anything else. We finally arrived to Formula 1, year 1974. At the age of 25, Pryce graduated to Formula 1, what we could call today like a super license. Formula 1 that was still there, the highest category of circuit racing defined by the FIA. Tom Pryce joined the newly formed Token Racing team. The team was created by Tony Vlasopoulos and Ken Grob after the original Token team closed down in 1973 due to the lack of financial backing, which had led to the end of the previous Rondel Racing outfit. Pryce was given the seat thanks to his backing from Titan Properties and what David Tremayne described as evident promise. Pryce made his debut for the team at the BRDC International Trophy, a non-championship Formula 1 event held at Silverstone, but the lack of an airbox and an engine cover, along with his shortage of experience in the car, made him the slowest driver of the 16 competitors during qualifying, 25 seconds slower than James Hunt's Hesketh in pole position. The Welshman retired 15 laps into the race with a gear linkage problem. Pryce's World Championship debut came at the 74 Belgian Grand Prix, where he qualified in 20th place, 3 seconds slower than the fastest time set by Claire Regazzoni. Once again, he failed to finish, completing 66 laps before retiring after a collision with Jody Scheckter driving a Tyrrell. Pryce was refused entry to the 74 Monaco F1 Grand Prix, as he was deemed inexperienced. Tony Vlasopoulos decided to prove a point and replaced normal Formula 3 drivers for the team with Tom Pryce for the supporting race, driving for Hippocampus Racing in a March 743. Tom Pryce won the race by almost 21 seconds. Following his drive in Monaco and a short spell in Formula 2, Pryce was signed by Shadow as replacement for Brian Redman, who had in turn replaced the late Peter Revson. Pryce made his debut for the team in Holland. He qualified in 11th position, less than 0.4 seconds slower than his teammate Jean-Pierre Jarier, who was in his second full season of Formula 1 competition. Tom retired on the first lap of the race after a collision with James Hunt at the first corner broke his Shadow DNS3 rear suspension. Pryce qualified third in his second Grand Prix for the team in France, 0.3 seconds slower than Niki Lauda's pole position time, but nearly half a second quicker than Jean-Pierre Jarier teammate. Once again, Pryce's race ended at the first corner, when minor contact with Carlos Reutemann's Brabham deflected Pryce's Shadow into the path of James Hunt. The second collision between the two British drivers in as many races eliminated them both. Later in the season, Pryce received 100 bottles of champagne for finishing fastest in the practice session for the British Grand Prix at Brands Hatch. He went on to qualify on the 4th row of the starting grid. Pryce scored the first point of his career in Germany, at the most challenging circuit of the F1 calendar at the time, the 14.2 miles, 20 kilometers, Nürburgring circuit. After finishing 6th from the 11th on the grid, he then qualified in 16th for the next Grand Prix in Austria, but spun off on lap 22, ending his race. He qualified in 22nd place in Italy and finished 12 places higher in 10th. His season ended with an engine failure in Canada and the shadow completely off the pace at Watkins Glen in the United States. At the end of the season, Pryce was equal 18th in the Drivers' Championship with veteran Graham Hill and Vittorio Brambilla. At the start of the 1975 season, Pryce's future was subject to much speculation. Rumors linked him with a drive at Lotus, the team run by Colin Chapman, who had been keeping an eye on Pryce's progress through 73 and 74 seasons. At the time, Lotus was experiencing financial difficulties, and reports suggested that Shadow Team and Lotus would swap Pryce and the Swedes driver Ronnie Peterson. The trade was viewed as a good acquisition for both teams, as Pryce was considered a driver of the same ability as Peterson, but would cost Lotus less, while Peterson could attract sponsorship to the relatively new Shadow team. The deal never materialized, although Shadow team manager Alan Rees claims that it came very close to being completed. Pryce's Shadow teammate Jean-Pierre Jarier outqualified him in the early part of the 75 season, as the French driver had the new Shadow DN5 car, while Pryce was in the order DN3. It was not until the third round, the South African Grand Prix, that Pryce was able to use a DN5. The team's fourth race of the season was the non-championship Race of Champions held at Brands Hatch. Pryce qualified on pole position and, following a poor start, passed Peterson and Jack Hicks before closing an 8th-second gap to race leader Jody Scheckter, whose engine failed while Pryce harried him, letting Pryce to then become the first Welshman to win a Formula One race. Tom Pryce also showed other signs of promise during the season, most notably in Monaco and Silverstone, where he qualified on the front row of the grid, the latter being in pole position. Pryce also achieved his first World Championship podium finish in extremely wet conditions at the Austrian Grand Prix and finished in the points 4 more times. The highest of those came in Germany, where he finished 4th, despite the fact, while he was running second behind Carlos Reutemann, fuel had been leaking into the cockpit of his DN5 during the final laps around the Nürburgring, reportedly searing his skin and almost blinding him with fumes. The Welshman later received the Prix Rouge et Blanc Joe Siffert Award, named after the Swiss Formula One driver for this achievement. At the end of December 75, Pryce and Dave Richards, future head of the ProDrive Motorsport Engineering Company, entered a Lancia Stratos in the Tour of Epinth, a rally event contested by many established rallying names. Tom Pryce needed little persuasion to team up for the one-off event on home soil with Richards, both of whom were from Ruthin. Pryce crashed into a bridge 10 miles, 16 kilometers, into the first stage, but still competed in the afternoon stages after his car was rebuilt. Once the 1975 Formula One World Championship season got underway, Pryce instantly added a second podium finish to his tally at the first round in Brazil. This came at the expense of continuing teammate Jarier, who was caught out by oil on the track from James Hunt's McLaren. Both Shadows enjoyed reasonable competitiveness during the next two races at Kyalami and Long Beach. Changes in car regulations, meaning that teams had to lower their airboxes and mount the car's rear wing further forward, along with revised Goodyear tires, meant the Shadow DN5B lost much of its competitiveness. Pryce still achieved a second points scoring finish of the season in Britain. The new Shadow DN8 was not introduced until the 12th round at Zandvoort, where Pryce qualified the new car in third position and finished the race only one place lower in fourth. It was the last points scoring finish of his career. The Welshman finished his last full season 12th in the Drivers' Championship with 10 points, 59 behind world champion James Hunt. In 1977, again rumors that Pryce would run as Mario Andretti's teammate for the Lotus team in 1978, and those rumors were very strong, because it was not also a coincidence that by the end of 77, the contract with the Shadow team that Tom Pryce had was going to come to an end. A Lotus mechanic of the era even claimed many years later that the signing of Tom Pryce for the team would have become a reality if he had not died, as Peterson was hired at the last minute after an express offer from Chapman for a succulent amount of money in exchange for being Mario Andretti's number 2 in replacement of Gunnar Nilsson, who was going to go to the Arrows team in 1978 to team up with Riccardo Patrese. This latter fact was confirmed by Patrese in Motorsport magazine in an interview by Simon Taylor in 2010. Jean-Pierre Jarier left Shadow team before the start of the 1977 Formula 1 season, going to drive for ATS team, and was then replaced by Italian Renzo Zorzi, who was later rated by Jackie Oliver, part of the managerial team at Shadow, as the worst driver we, the Shadow team, ever had. The new signing brought in sponsorship from Italy, easing Shadow's financial position. Pryce started the first race of the year in Argentina, in 9th place, and stayed with the leading group until a gear link age failure on the lap 45 out of 52 ended his race. Following a long pit stop to fix the fault, he was not classified. Pryce then qualified 12th for the second round in Brazil, but on lap 34 retired from the race, while running in second place as the result of an engine failure. Tom Pryce began his final race weekend, the 1977 South African GP at Kyalami, by setting the fastest time in the Wednesday practice session held in wet weather. Pryce posted a time of 1 minute and 31 seconds, with the next best, the eventual 77 world champion Niki Lauda, 1 second slower. Unluckily, the weather dried up prior to the Thursday session, and he slipped back down the grid to 15th place, almost 2 seconds slower than James Hunt pole position time. Pryce made a poor start to the Grand Prix in his Shadow DN8, and by the end of the first lap was in last place. He started to climb back up the field during the next couple of laps, overtaking Langer and teammate Zorzi on lap 2, and then Alex Ribeiro and Boy Hay the following lap. By lap 18, Pryce had moved from 22nd to 13th place. On lap 22, Zorzi pulled off to the left side of the main street, just after the brow of a hill and a bridge over the track. He was having problems with his fuel metering unit, and fuel was pumping directly onto the engine, which then caught fire. Zorzi did not immediately get out of his car, as he could not disconnect the oxygen pipe from his helmet. The situation unluckily caused 2 marshals from the pit wall on the opposite side of the track to intervene. The first marshal to cross the track was a 25-year-old panel beater named Bill, and the second one was a 19-year-old Frederick Jansen van Vuren, who was carrying a 40 pounds 18 kilograms fire extinguisher. George Witt, the chief pit marshal for the race, said that the policy of the circuit was that in cases of fire, 2 marshals must attend, and a further 2 act as a backup in case the first pair's extinguishers were not effective enough. Witt also recalled that both marshals crossed the track without prior permission. The former narrowly made it across the track, but the latter did not. As the 2 men started to run across the track, the cars driven by Hans-Joachim Stuck and Tom Pryce came over the brow of a rise in the track. Pryce was directly behind Stuck's car, along the main straight. Hans Stuck saw Jansen van Buren and moved to the right to avoid both marshals, missing Bill by what Tremaine calls millimeters. From his position, Pryce could not see Jansen van Buren and was unable to react as quickly as Stuck had done. He struck the teenage marshal at approximately 270 km per hour, 170 miles per hour. Jansen van Buren was thrown into the air and landed a few yards in front of Zorzi's car. He died on impact, and his body was badly mutilated by Pryce's car. The fire extinguisher he had been carrying smashed into Pryce's head before striking the Shadow's roll hoop. The force of the impact was such that the extinguisher was thrown up and over the closed grandstand. It landed in the car park to the rear of the stand, where it finally hit a parked car and jammed its door shut. The impact with the fire extinguisher wrenched Pryce's helmet upward sharply. Death was almost certainly instantaneous. Pryce's Shadow DN8, now with its driver dead at the wheel, continued at speed down the main straight toward the first corner, called Crowthorne. The car left the track to the right, scraping the metal barriers, hitting an entrance for emergency vehicles, and veering back onto the track. It then hit Jacques Lafitte's Ligier, sending both Pryce and Lafitte head-on into the barriers. Jansen van Buren's marshal's injuries were so extensive that initially his body was identified only after the race director had summoned all of the race marshals, and he was not among them. The eventual race winner was Austrian Niki Lauda, his first win since his near-fatal accident during the '76 German Grand Prix. At first, he announced it was the greatest victory of his career, but when told on the victory podium of Pryce's death, he said that there was not any more joy after that. Tom Pryce's death was met with great grief from all those who knew him, especially his wife Nella, his parents Jack and Gwyneth, and the Shadow team. His body was buried at St. Bartholomew's Church in Otford, Kent region, the same church where he and Nella were married 2 years earlier. Pryce's performances in a Formula One car earned him much respect amongst the F1 paddock. David Tremaine named his son after the Welshman. The Tom Pryce Award, also known as the Tom Pryce Trophy, was instigated and is given annually to Welsh personalities who have made an outstanding contribution to motoring or transport. During its redesign, the Anglesey circuit in North Wales named the Tom Pryce Straight after a request from Ruthin Town Council. Eddie Knipe, a South African living in Sevenoaks, sought permission from Nella Pryce, the wife, to approach the Ruthin Town Council to commemorate her late husband. Having gained her consent and that of Tom's parents, a trust was established in 2006 under the chairmanship of David Richards to create a memorial to Tom Pryce in Ruthin. Neil Dalrymple, a local artist, was commissioned by Ruthin Town Council in 2008 to design an 8 by 4 foot, 2.4 by 1.2 meters plaque. And in February 2009, an auction of Formula One pit passed to fund its manufacturer, that then was announced. The memorial was unveiled on 11th of June 2009 on what would have been Pryce's 60th birthday. In 2016, in an academic paper that reported a mathematical modeling study that assessed the relative influence of drivers and machines, Tom Pryce was ranked the 28th best Formula One driver of all time. I decided to produce this tribute because I don't want to celebrate in some way the life of Tom Pryce, that to me was initially a sort of complete shock for the way I did learn about his tragic end by a couple of friends older than me at the beginning of the 80s, when my only thinking, like all the other childs, was just playing, dreaming of becoming a Formula One driver, or just playing with F1 model scale machines. But I didn't want to remember Tom Pryce just for his tragic death and for all the consequences regarding safety in Formula One. I do want to remember Tom Pryce as an extreme talented driver that never had the possibility, an opportunity, a real opportunity to drive a competitive F1 car. But every time that the occasion came to his hands, he was capable, even with slower car and in the most difficult condition, to show to the world how good he was at the wheel of a racing car. So differently from the tribute I dedicated to Mike Hawthorne, I cannot hope Tom Pryce, wherever he is now, to be just a driver running his last Grand Prix, because for Mike Hawthorne was the last Grand Prix, finally achieving his first and only World Championship title. For Tom, I think it could be just sad and tragic run around the Kyalami circuit. So my only hope for Tom, wherever he is to drive finally that Lotus that rumors linked to his career too many times and that never happened. But I hope also that finally driving a competitive Lotus 78 F1 car, in some way Tom finally is winning races and a more than deserved amount of wins to finally achieve at least one World Championship driver's title, as I think he absolutely deserved for the wasted talent that a tragic set of coincidences did not allow to happen.